Hi, folks, it's Mark Merrill with Firm's Journal. This time we're going to be talking about voter fraud and Amendment 2 again. But there's some updates coming from the National Rifle Association I think a lot of people would be interested in, especially about our freedoms, which are called mostly the Bill of Rights, 1 through 10. Now, from our Freedom of the Press colleague Steve Robinson, editor-in-chief of the Maine Wire, looky what I found in the Amazon package. Oh, great. All we need, right? Well, it seems, folks, that what happened not too long ago, a Maine woman finds bundles of election ballots in Amazon package. So it appears that the delivery of election ballots to an unauthorized Maine resident raises new questions about the security of Maine's elections under Secretary of State Shenna Bellows. It just keeps on coming, the gift that keeps on coming, doesn't it, folks? Isn't that a lovely picture there of what this woman received in the mail through Amazon or as a delivery? Here's the deal. A resident of Newburgh here in Maine received an unusual order from Amazon on Tuesday, September the 30th, September 30th. A bag of rice, some paper plates, a lightsaber toy for her child, and what is that? Yeah, it is, folks. 250 authentic state of Maine election ballots printed in advance for the November 4th statewide election this year. The Amazon package that arrived containing the ballots appeared beat up and bore signs of having been retaped, as if someone had opened the package, inserted the ballots, and then reapplied the package tape. Oh, goodness sakes, people. You know, the ballots resemble the format of authentic Maine ballots and are packaged in tamper-evident batches of 50, just like the bundles typically shipped to municipal election officials. Multiple election officials who reviewed the images prior to publication of the story by Maine Wire confirmed the images appear to show authentic 2025 Maine ballots. Yikes. The resident who discovered the misappropriated ballots was shocked to see them amidst her anticipated Amazon order of other items, as you already heard, and quickly offloaded them at the local town office. She said, without her identity being given away, anonymously, "I am greatly concerned for our state and its voting requirements. Today, I, meaning her, received a rather beat-up package with my mail. When I opened it, there were 250 official state of Maine referendum ballots in my box. Thank goodness I'm an honest citizen and immediately reached out to my town clerk and took the ballots to the town for safekeeping." Although the off-year election comes 1 year before the major 2026 election cycle, it's nonetheless consequential for all future elections because of the high-stakes ballot referendum question that would bring Maine voter ID to Maine. Question 1. Well, the Maine Democratic Party chairman, here we go, here comes the backlash, or the denial. That's why we call them deflectocrats, folks. They deny the truth and deflect everything else as well. But the Democratic Party here in the state of Maine, Charlie Dingman, healthcare attorney based in Augusta, said the Democrats could lose more than 13,000 votes if Maine residents are required to prove their identities before casting ballots. In a May 30th text message to voters, Dingman said that if Maine adopted voter ID requirements similar to those of 36 other states, it could result in a loss of 13,000 Democrat votes being counted in subsequent elections. The stakes so high, the epic blunder of Newburgh will only cast more doubt on the legitimacy of Maine's elections, as well as the conduct of arch-partisan Shenna Bellows, our Secretary of State currently, unfortunately. a lifelong leftist activist who is currently seeking the Democratic nomination to run for governor in 2026. Well, that's enough. What a joke you are, Ms. Bellows. Total, just, I don't know, folks. She's just a one step short of a bushel basket, but at the same time, she's also a few mortared bricks short of a load. Everything she touches turns to dirt, or hate, or violence, or scam. Yeah, exactly. But now, folks, we're going to skip over after the little mail issue there with the lady from Newburgh to a Voice of Freedom weekend update from September 27th and how the Second Amendment rights and freedoms are just fine, thank you very much. Here's why from the Second Amendment source, the National Rifle Association, with their Voice of Freedom. So, here we go. With these pictures here, folks, we're going to start first with the NRA's New America Rifle Challenge. What do they call it that for? Well, the AR-15 rifle you've probably heard of. This gentleman is testing it out in this picture up here. Has become America's most popular rifle, and the NRA's NRA Rifles Challenge program offers new accessible ways for owners to put their rifles to use safely and competitively and enjoyably for not just hunting and game, skeet, shooting, and also other kinds of competition. The ARC program blends marksmanship training with competition, aiming to appeal to both beginners and experienced shooters alike. And going on to a couple of other articles, folks, we don't want to spend too much time on that as we delve into our voter fraud, which you've already heard about, and the Second Amendment, and some updates, some good ones. So we should every now and then give you some positive news on our Bill of Rights. Still intact, folks. It's never been taken down just because Janet Mills and Joe Biden said so. Canada has a gun grab. Amnesty expiration approaches as top officials sow confusion. This is from the NRA staff. Canada's Liberal government consistently and misleadingly used buyback to describe a 2020 mandatory assault weapon confiscation law in an attempt, this is an attempt now, to make the scheme appear less hostile to property rights and Canada's responsible gun owners and more palatable to the general public. But recent pronouncements on the gun ban and confiscation have now veered even further down the road as disingenuous political messaging. Canadians aren't as dumb as the previous leadership under Justin Trudeau or this current Prime Minister think they are. Another news under the Second Amendment here, folks. Johns Hopkins turns public health into gun control. Now, when Johns Hopkins University's Bloomberg School of Public Health recently unveiled the 2025 National Survey of Gun Policy, the headlines were predictable. Americans supposedly back stricter storage rules, licensing requirements, and red flag laws. Well, you know how that's going in the state of Maine. That's up for question 2. However, that looks to be defeated. I'm surprised, actually, that Janet Mills is against it to begin with. But on this particular story, behind the numbers lies a familiar one. One of billionaire Michael Bloomberg's money, used to be a candidate for president all those 5 or 6 years ago. political agendas dressed up as science, quote unquote, and a survey designed to produce the outcome its sponsors already wanted. The Center for Gun Violence Solutions, created in 2022 through Bloomberg's partnership with Johns Hopkins, makes no secret of its mission. Now, here's one, folks, you really want to just kind of say, here he goes again, trying to push some legislation through the state of Californication land and not getting anywhere. Ba-dum-tsh. Slam dunk. Ain't going to happen. So, what will Gavin Newsom and or Kamala Harris do regarding Glocks? Glockenspiel weapons, right? Probably one of these right here in your picture at the bottom, folks. California's state legislature adjourned for the year, unsurprisingly, sent a number of anti-gun bills to Governor Newsom to consider. Damn it. While it would be completely within his nature to simply sign them into law, perhaps his desires to become president will cause him to at least think about what's in the best interest of his political future regarding one of those bills. Yeah, more cocktail parties and less freedoms for his people. Sadly, the way the article goes on, the NRA's printout here on the Voice of Freedom says they've learned that you really shouldn't expect Newsom's decisions to be guided by what's in the best interests of Californians, and certainly not the law-abiding ones who own firearms. Hi, we've got quite a few 100,000 up here in Maine. Good luck with that, Newsom. You'd never win any kind of an election up here in the great Northeast. I can just about guarantee you that one. Slick Willie. A couple of other ones, folks, here on the Second Amendment, as we talk about things in our firm journal called Voter Fraud and Amendment 2. Highlights with good news. The case for mouse guns. Now, you might ask, well, what's that? Under certain circumstances, the person writing this article says, Chris Seipert, writing this article, says he carries small guns in small calibers, and such as a 38 caliber or a 32 caliber, and upon learning this, people often express surprise and ask him how confident he is in successfully defending himself with a caliber smaller than 9mm. To take a short trip down memory lane to 30 or 40 years ago, that's a ways back, he grew up in a time when everyone knew 9mm was weak and the only serious choice for self-defense was a .45 ACP. The gun culture of the 80s and 90s treated caliber as a gospel. A bigger bullet meant better stopping power, and if you weren't carrying a full-size .45, you weren't taking self-defense seriously. That conventional wisdom turned out to be, let's just say, not totally true. Our understanding of terminal ballistics has matured. We've learned that all service pistol calibers are inherently limited, and effectiveness has to do more with shot placement and penetration than bullet diameter. Interesting. The story of pistol-mounted red dot sights, or RDSs, begins in the rebellion against the constraints of iron sights. Competitive shooters in IPSC and USPCA, PSA, during the late 80s and early 1990s were the first to experiment strapping oversized tube-type dots onto their handguns. They quickly realized that a single focal plane and bright aiming point shaved precious tenths of a second from transitions and split times. Quite interesting on that one. Wrapping up this article as well, folks, since it would take both miniaturization and proven reliability before optics could make the jump from competition race guns to practical carry pistols in conceal and carry. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are pretty much done with those particular articles right there, but we are going to finish up with the one behind me you see here in regard to our friend Mr. Jay Sekulow, president and founder with his son Jordan of ACLJ, the American Center for Law and Justice. If you cannot read that sign in red with yellow highlights, it says, "We demand freedom for the hostages," meaning the ACLJ. And the lady holding the sign says, "Bring them home," with a broken heart behind her. Scripture makes it clear, ladies and gentlemen, God bless all those who bless Israel and curse those who curse her. Mr. Sekulow starts off by saying, "We at the ACLJ make this mandate seriously, and God has positioned us to make a difference with the support of pro-Israel members with his organization. They've just sent a legal demand letter to the UN Security Council requesting that it secure the unconditional and immediate release of all remaining hostages in Hamas captivity in Gaza." This, of course, ladies and gentlemen, is a precursor to what has already been published in the national and world news, that it looks like there will be a ceasefire and hostages released. Stay tuned to your news networks that you rely on for more details. In the meantime, ACLJ has always been representing the families of multiple Israeli hostages held by Hamas, and they secured releases for 6 clients. Very good. Also, Mr. Sekulow says they are urging world leaders to pressure Hamas to release hostages and take serious steps to dismantle Hamas and other terrorist organizations operating in the Gaza Strip. "We've mobilized our office in Jerusalem for ACLJ and offices around the globe, preparing to take aggressive legal action supporting Israel's right to defend itself against a nuclear-armed Iran. Also, we're starting to sound the alarm as world leaders in France, the UK, and Ireland take a harsh stance against Israel and threaten to recognize Palestinian statehood, a tremendously dangerous action." Mr. Sekulow's team of lawyers on the ground in Jerusalem are working daily to protect Israel's right to exist. The sun never sets on the critical work in Israel and for the Jewish people everywhere. One final statement, personal word from Mr. Sekulow. He's the grandchild of Jewish immigrants, and the October 7th attack sickened me to my core, as it did nearly every Jewish American. When the violence began, he warned it wouldn't take long for the sentiment to turn to sympathy for Israel to condemnation of our ally. Unfortunately, he was right. Sad. "The blatant anti-Semitism being displayed in America and around the world is the highest I've ever seen in my lifetime," he says, "which makes our unique and powerful work together in defense of Israel's interests more important, more necessary, and it pushes American Center for Law and Justice, ACLJ, refuse to turn their back on Israel in her time of need. Please keep praying. We stand with Israel," says Mr. Sekulow. "We pray for Israel and will defend Israel's interests across the globe. And that's our program, folks. Basically on voter fraud, and then follow up on Amendment 2, and a quick message of support for Israel and the end to all this Hamas nonsense. Threats. Say one thing, do another. Kind of sounds like the Democrats, doesn't it? Except the Democrats have to pay somebody to do their dirty work, and their gun-toting and shooting and taking the food supplies that have been coming in on monthly bases and being sidetracked to feed their fat faces and starve the people in Gaza. There's people from all races in Gaza, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us here at Firm for more details. We are a member, and have been since 2021, of the American Center for Law and Justice, ACLJ, and Jay Sekulow and Jordan, his son. In the meantime, always check out our podcast on YouTube, X, and 24 hours a day on either one of those social media links. But contact us if you have some ideas on other topics that you'd like to hear about or express your own opinion. We'd be more than welcome to read about them and maybe turn it into a podcast itself. Mark Merrill here for Farm. Peace to all.